I'm Eric Love, and I graduated from CFS in 2005.
I'm Lucius Robinson, and along with Eric, I also graduated in 2005. Yeah, but since graduating, both Eric and I have kind of gone off in different directions, but both have been pursuing theater professionally and passionately.
Passionately, for sure.
Passionately and professionally, yes.
For the last 10 years, we've done a project that we've called the CFS Alumni Theatre Project. And it's an interesting model. We come together for 1 week, normally between Christmas and New Year's, and we rehearse about 12 hours a day for 5 days. Then we tech it for a day and perform it for 2 days. And it's an all alumni welcome experience, and we've ranged from a 2-person show with just the 2 of us to over 20 people in Jim Henderson's Ariel's Way, with a full band and dancers, singers, actors, a whole extravaganza. So it's been a very diverse project.
Yeah, we came together to produce, to perform an original one-act entitled Them Yankees that Eric and Caitlin Perlman had written. And that was sort of our first expedition together as a crew. Whether or not the show itself was really successful, I know I really enjoyed coming back and working with everybody, and that was, I think that was a really, I know that, and sort of that aspect of coming back together to be with people, that at the time I didn't understand that, and now I feel like I'm only beginning to understand it 10 years later, but that was a very important piece of the puzzle, and I think as Eric said, it helps set an intention. Certainly it helps sort of develop an expectation for what we might be looking for in the next go-around.
Our second year, we came back together for another original work between myself and Caitlin Perlman, writing The Adventures of Inspector Gumshoe. That was a French detective farce. I remember there was a whole scene where David Berger-Jones was saying, Sudoku? And you're like, Sudoku, Sudoku, Sudoku. Yeah, it's really funny. You'll have to take my word on that. So the next year was a big turning point because I was calling all our friends and rallying for another project, and everyone dropped out, except Lucius. And I was ready to, I was like, okay, fine, we'll just not do it again, like, it's fine, whatever. I was a little upset. And then Lucius was like, no, we can do something, let's do a 2-person show.
Calling this a turning point is very right in that, because I think it went from it being kind of, I think for me it sort of transformed from it being sort of like a fun thing to, I don't know, starting to feel this compelling to be there, which I think is a really important part of what this became. But yeah, I think previously we had sort of depended on group energy and sort of people come together and say, yeah, why not, we'll hang out for a week, and then suddenly we were in a position where it was either going to stop there or we were going to have to sort of put our money where our mouth was and actually do something by ourselves.
Yeah. And sort of really stand behind what we were creating artistically, saying this is worth devoting our whole week to, and what are we going to discover, and we're going to be held accountable because it's just the 2 of us in front of our audience.
We didn't have a director. We had never really done anything like this before, but we came together, and I can remember rehearsals where we were running around in your garden and talking really intensely about these characters and talking about the play, and then just sort of generally reassuring each other that it was going to work.
Then we came together for Sarah Rule's Eurydice, which, if Carol Churchill's A Number was the turning point, Eurydice was sort of an awakening, a blossoming. We brought together, it was about 8 of us, so it was a bigger cast, and we were in this very room, and we came together and demanded the most from each other. And we basically never left this room for a week. And we lived and breathed and supported each other, and it was created a work that was really exceptional. I've been in college, this is now my senior year at a conservatory, and I'd never created work that was this personal. And that actually was a turning point for me as an actor, getting to play the father in Eurydice, directed by Lucius. It was the first time that I had someone asking me to do less, 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 nothing, nothing, I'm enough. And it changed me.
For me, the moment, there was sort of a turning point in the show where we'd been rehearsing for a few days, and then we were very tired, and then we had to eat. There came this point where we just needed to have some calories, and somebody ran off, and I think David Burger-Jones ran off and got like a Bojangles feast, and we set it up in this room where we had these battered teacups that we were drinking tea out of and eating like off of paper plates, and when we went back to rehearse after that, something had changed, and I don't totally know what it was, but we were suddenly together in a way that I had never experienced, maybe ever before in my life, with a group of people. And there was sort of an immediacy and a freshness and a willingness to be vulnerable and to be present with each other that made the work go from, I think, fun to meaningful. It was a really spontaneous, beautiful thing, and of the things I've done in my life, I think one of the things I'm the most proud of is getting to be a part of the creation of that, because it was a really cool thing. Definitely struck a chord within me, and I think within a lot of people who saw it. And I think Eric identifying that as an awakening. I don't know if any of us knew we were capable of that kind of dedication and then yielding that kind of payoff. Once I think we knew we we really wanted to keep doing that. Which then took us to the next year.
Yeah, and I will also say that my first professional directing job outside of North Carolina is going to be Eurydice.
It's very exciting.
This year, and that was sort of inspired by the experience we created here, and I've remembered, wow, that play has the power to transform and enchant, and I want to do it again. The thing about the having in the round suddenly, I was like, oh my god, well, what are we going to do? It's, everything's ruined, and Lucius was just like, just keep turning around. just keep turning around.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, okay. So that actually also set our aesthetic for fairy tales, in a way. Folklore, fairy tales,
Epic stories.
Epic stories. And so our next Alumni Theatre Project was a bit, crazy and wonderful. It was Jim Henderson's Ariel's Way, which is a musical adaptation of The Tempest. And this was very ambitious because we were planning to do a musical. And not just it was a 2-hour musical with an intermission, with a chorus of dancers, with a full 10-piece band. It was wonderful. It was an incredible project. I had played this role when I was a senior at CFS, and since then, Jim Henderson had continued to workshop and refine this play, and it's this musical. And so it was a fantastic gift to come back and bring so much of the community together. And we had 3 performances sold out in the Center Building. It was our first time in the Center Building since our earlier days doing the sort of cabaret and the dance concert. And it was also a wonderful amalgamation of the dance project, because Jessica Harris joined us, and she was our choreographer, and she could take this ensemble of divas who were Ariel's spirits and go off and create full dance numbers and come back. So by dividing and conquering, we learned that we can create big shows in 1 week. Yeah. So our next project was Metamorphoses. Are you sure we didn't do Metamorphoses and then here?
Well, no, because Eurydice was 08 into 09, Ariel's Way was 09 into 010, and Metamorphoses, I just graduated from college,
wow.
was 010 into 11. Yeah.
That's crazy.
One thing I have come to really enjoy about the beginnings of New Year's is that usually Eric and Kieran and I get to start having a conversation about what show we want to do next.
Almost immediately after we finish a show, Lucius turns to me and say, so what do you want to do next year?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so we followed this up with Metamorphoses, which, interesting choice, we wanted to capitalize on that Eurydice aesthetic. And this is Greek mythology by Mary Zimmerman. It's an amalgamation of 8 or 9 different myths. And we did it here in the Upper School Meeting Hall. And it was the first time we capitalized on the divide and conquer idea and had 3 directors.
Yeah, which as a model worked
really
well. And I would say I still get chills when I think about Metamorphoses as an experience, because it it was a big journey for me. I will say I was in the show when I was in high school, and I really did not like it.
Hated it.
I hated it. I would.
I don't even know why you said yes.
Well, and I initially was really against it when Eric was talking about doing it. I was saying, oh no, you have no idea. It's going to be such a drag. It's so this, it's so that, it's so this, and then but Eric had an idea that struck me, and I said, okay, fine, let's go for it. And I went from not liking that show to absolutely loving that show. But I think it was very much, it was the experience of being with the people and getting to make something together. And I would say that was really one of my first experiences with ensemble theater, which is something that I'm currently studying in graduate school. Definitely, I think a form which has really changed how I think about theater and life and community. There was this really beautiful, I'll use the phrase again, open-handedness, this ease, this willingness to trust in each other that I think we had started to find in Eurydice, and then I think perked up tremendously during Metamorphoses, where I didn't leave feeling like I was in charge, and I didn't leave feeling like I wasn't. I felt like I had a stake in it and I was responsible, but that it wasn't mine, it was ours. It was a shared vision that I don't think I could have achieved. And I would say I don't know if any of us could have achieved by ourselves. I think it was the kind of thing that was a product of our willingness to be with each other, which I think is also a really huge part of going to CFS, something I don't know if we would have even been sensitive to that had we not spent so many silent medias theater or so many classes together in which we sort of learned to listen.
So I think that after Metamorphoses, I think we started to get more and more ambitious with our newfound communal power. So our next project was The Elephant Man, and that we did in the Center Building, and that was a really fantastic experience. We made it in the round, it's sort of square, and Sam put butcher paper on the entire floor, and we graffitied on it with charcoal, and I mean, it was a really immersive space. And they made a Tyvek wall, right?
Yeah, we had been trying to think of ways to transform the center space, so we ended up calling what we made the off-center.
The off-center.
We put up a false wall, usually where the audience and the performance space is usually divided right now in the way that it's normally set up. And then my brother Sam Robinson, who had appeared in a number of shows before that and helped design our sets, he got really invested in that one, which I loved. And yeah, he covered the floor in butcher paper, he covered the walls in Tyvek, created a beautiful shadow screen out of muslin. And created a space that I think felt profoundly different from how the center normally feels. And I remember a number of people bringing that up, which I thought was a real achievement for a space that I think many people are very familiar with, so to call them into a place where they question that familiarity, I think is a great thing.
So after The Elephant Man, Lucius comes to me and said, with this idea of fairy tales and these exciting sort of folklore and mythology, we should do Peter Pan.
I thought, how could we do Peter Pan in a way that the school has not yet seen, which then led into a year-long journey for me, reading and rereading all these different versions of it, getting really immersed in that world, and still have plenty of ideas. Would love to go back there at some point. But.
And Lucius rewrote it to have the part of Peter Pan, which I played, also was grown up, having forgotten who he was as a boy. And so these long passages from the book were included as monologues as he tries to remember what happened. And it was a 2.5-hour epic.
It was huge.
And it was, I was near a nervous breakdown at Perth. I think we all hit these points of like, oh my God, what are we doing? This is so insane. And it turns out to be, another experience of like we sort of set it on a diagonal in the Center Building, and there were so many people we ended up doing like in a full round. So there was people behind sort of the nursery, sort of looking in the window. I mean, it was incredible.
I think that we had very, very, very graciously the Paperhand Puppet Theater. They loaned us their rehearsal and development space for our rehearsal, because I believe we managed to do that show before Christmas that year. It was slightly off, so we weren't able to rehearse actually in the center that year.
Now, so that was a turning point as well. This is our 7th show, I think?
I think so, 7.
And it was getting bigger, and then we hit this point of like, okay, we can do anything we put our minds to, but we only have a week. What is essential about what we're trying to do? So we said, too long. So next year is like, okay, we want to include a lot of people and do a big show, but our producer, Laura Schmania, who works on the CFS Alumni Committee and sort of runs alumni affairs, she said, Eric, we would really love a comedy this year. And, you know, it was sort of like at first I was like, well, what? You know, have we been doing something wrong? She's like, no, we've loved your selection of really intense, dark theater. But what if we laughed? I don't know, too crazy? So I emailed all my teachers from school. I said, what are your favorite comedies? I read tons of plays. But the challenge of finding a play that can accommodate all skill levels and as many people, say, you know, 8 to 20 people, is really hard, especially in a comedy. So I read a ton of plays, and early on, Lucius said, what about Twelfth Night? And I said, no, I'm not doing Shakespeare in a week. I'm not doing it. And then I read a ton of plays, and he said, none of them fit. And he said, Eric, what about Twelfth Night? And he sent me a breakdown of characters, and I thought, oh darn, this actually works really well. So we spent a few months trimming it, all the fat, any line that would be potentially difficult to interpret was cut. And we got an hour and 30-minute version. And there was about 12 of us initially, and then the word just sort of spread, and I just kept getting emails. Can I be in it? Can I be in it? Can I be in it? And we ended up with 17 people, and it was a lot of the next generation that we hadn't worked with a lot before, which was very exciting. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, we were spanning, 8 years of CFS alumni.
Yeah, I think previously it had been maybe 1 or 2, like with 04, 05, 06. And then suddenly I think we were hitting a much larger demographic of alums, which is great, which I think that too, I think, started to change the nature of the project. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a point that we find ourselves at today, which is very exciting. But yeah, I think a new development.
And then for me, yet another sort of life turning point with the CFS experience, getting to direct Twelfth Night was like, oh wow, I can direct Shakespeare, and then my options just sort of like blossomed in the professional world, and it just was very exciting to have something that we were doing at CFS influencing my life outside of CFS. It was really cool. And then that brings us to the present. This year we did an original work.
We had a group of 10. This was by far the greatest split in terms of, split, but a pretty wide range. We sort of hit a wider spectrum this year in terms of age. I think also in terms of experience level, people who had graduated 30 years ago, people who had graduated just the previous May. Which was really exciting. It presented a new kind of challenge, and I also think it sort of redefined the point of the project for me to a certain extent. I think in the past we had worked with people that we knew very well. We had done material that I think was really suitable for us at that time. I think now we were appealing to a different group. I think we were tackling different material.
It was also a very big crossroads because it was the 50th anniversary of CFS this year, and it was our 10th anniversary, and it was a celebration of the arts. So we had a fantastic dance performance in the center building led by Jessica Harris, and then a reception, and then our show, and then we switched the next day. The community had never been stronger. It was really beautiful. And so now we've hit this decade mark, and the big question for me is, what's next? You know, how do we keep evolving this project so that it is reaching the most amount of people and fulfilling the artistic place that we are in at each moment, you know?
Look forward, I think also something that's coming up is the development of this performing arts facility, which I think is really going to change the landscape of, I would say, this entire community, and I would say absolutely for the better. I'm really excited that this.
Well, we've used that. We've used that as a beacon to help rally people. For the last 3 years, we've actually done our events as fundraisers for the building, the Performing Arts Center. And part of me was like, oh my gosh, we only raised a few $1,000s, like what's the point? We need millions of dollars. But then I realized it was actually sharing the importance of arts at Friends School that could interest someone with some better finances to help us out. So that's been a real beacon. And whether or not we have a big fancy theater tomorrow or in 5 years, we're going to still continue to create theater in all these incredible spaces at CFS. So for the future, we really don't know. It's a year-to-year exploration. So we do know that we love coming back to CFS. We do know that we want to include as many CFS alumni and people who want to be involved. And we do know, at least personally, this is one of the most rewarding experiences that I engage in each year. And it fuels me and inspires me to be a better actor, a better director, a better artist, and go out into the world and share that and experience that. So.
And I guess maybe as we wrap up, I think a really profound note of gratitude from us to, we could probably easily take an hour to just...
And I think one of the words that keeps coming up to my mind is home. We can come home to Carolina Friends School, and it's still welcoming us with open arms. Whereas if my brother wanted to go back to his old high school, it's sort of like, wait, why are you here? You graduated 10 years ago. But CFS is saying, welcome back.
Here. Yeah.
Welcome back, and we're going to give you a space and time and love to create whatever is in your heart. And it doesn't get better than that.
And something that I think is really wonderful about this project is that it does give us the opportunity to come into a place together and maybe not having made too many decisions. And I think actually to a certain extent, I think not making too many decisions, not being too sure is a wonderful thing that we give ourselves permission to do. I think something I very firmly believe is that if you are willing to listen to a piece, or willing to listen to a group of people, willing to listen to a proposal, willing to be present to that, you will learn just about everything you need to know about what the piece is going to be, what the piece wants to be. To take Metamorphoses, for example, we came in here after a couple of days of rehearsal. We opened up the trailer that used to be down by the center, pulled out a bunch of stuff, threw it together and said, hey, maybe it could be that, and maybe it could be that, and maybe it could be that. These pieces fell together, and we said, that looks like about what we want it to look like. Let's try this thing on it. Let's try that thing on it. There's a freedom and a willingness to play that I think is really unrivaled, at least in terms of, a lot of the rehearsal experiences I've had, people being very open, people being willing to try something with all of themselves and then let that go immediately with no ego, I think is a really important part of the whole thing. So I think our process is one of really zealous, really deliberate play, and also one of a very great trust and one of very, I think, effortless letting go. These are all, I think, really big pieces of it, and I think it can only be really achieved in a situation where we have to say yes, because to say no is to waste time, and we have so little of it, and we have so much trust. So each of these things, I think they really play very strongly off of each other.
Zealous play, great trust, and effortless letting go. I think we got to write that down.
Great.
That's exciting. But for me, that process has taught me that theater will be created in however much time you allow it to be created. If we have a year to put on 12th Night, it will take us every moment of that year. And that is true, we have a week, it takes a week. Yeah, we're going to be there 12 hours a day, and then we're going to go home and wander around my yard learning lines at night, but it's going to happen. And if we have a day, you know what, we'll put it up in a day. And that has been huge. And sort of bring people into this pressure cooker environment and say, for 1 week you can forget about everything else in your life and just think about telling this story. It creates this excitement and it creates this momentum that is unrivaled. In college, we would go and we would rehearse 3 hours a night after classes for 6 weeks. Here we do about the work we do in 1 week per day. That's what we sort of figured out. And sure, we all hit walls during these times where we just think, why are we doing this? We can't go on. Then we go home, we get a little food, we get a little sleep, and we're back at it. Yeah. So it's exciting.
The kind of thing where I can be driving and I can think of something that was said or that was done in this room, and I can want, like with my whole being, to just be
Back.
here again and doing it again, because there's nothing like it.
In a way, our process is, we started to think of it like a sandbox. So we realized it was important to acknowledge where we are in our lives before coming into the project, that we're not creating this in a vacuum. So we sort of conference Lucius, Kieran, and myself, and we think, okay, what is important for us to explore in our own artistic development, but also with the school? Like, have we done Shakespeare yet? Have we done a musical yet? Has that person been challenged? Has this person been challenged? Who needs some more opportunities? And then we get to take all of our life experience of that year and come together in this place to play, zealous play, and create together in this very safe space, like a child would when they're playing in their sandbox. You know, they're not thinking like, oh, is this castle going to be good enough to be at the Nasher? It's really innocent. And because we're at CFS, and there's this very sense of like, whatever we do is going to be appreciated. No one's here to review us. No one's here paying $50 a ticket and getting mad if it's not what they expected. So it's this freedom to play like a child would have and does. And then we get to take what we learned from that very free place back out into the world. Our job before we arrive is to create the box, to create the situation in which we're going to play. Mm-hmm. What's the script? What's at least what building are we in? Who's cast in what? And then in a style, you know, sometimes we'll come in with some music, sometimes we'll come in with a time period in mind, and then we just go. So part of moving into the future is realizing that this is sort of a workshop experience, and that it's a 1 week of really intense training. And when people are coming up, for example, when we were doing 12th Night, a lot of our actors had never been in Shakespeare before. And so it wasn't just like put on a play. We spent the time and took the time to talk about verse, talk about the first folio and punctuation, talk about style and how, you know, sort of resisting this temptation to be Shakespearean. And acknowledging that this is new for people, and we can take a moment to learn together and teach and share some of the knowledge that we've learned out in the world. And it's sort of a cool situation where, you know, Lucius, Kieran, and myself, Emily, David Berger-Jones, a big handful of us have gone on to become professional actors. But there's another huge handful of people who are incredible actors, could do it professionally if they wanted, but have gone on to choose something else and want a space to come back and experience and that environment again and act and be in a play. So we can share all the knowledge we're working on year-round with these wonderful actors who haven't had the chance to be exposed to some of these training and skills.
I think the things that we would teach are going to be bound up in the nature of the show. Yeah. So in the context of 12th Night, absolutely, I think we kind of had certainly probably 2 days worth of a workshop on how to scan your text, on what does punctuation mean, on how to be sort of really present and sort of play the circumstances and play the stakes of the character while also not being Shakespearean, not getting to a place where you're so over the top you cease to be believable. Yeah. I'd say in the case of Long After Love, that was more veering into the realm of I would say clown, or at least really heightened eccentric characters. Yeah, we never really sat down and talked about it as such, which is not to say that we couldn't, because I think the educational properties or educational possibilities of the project are certainly great. Something I had said to the cast of Long After Love just before we went up, and something that I certainly believe, is that once the show opened, it was not as though the process of discovery and creation was going to come to a halt. I have felt in myself, and I've seen in other casts, that once you hit opening night, there's this expectation, and maybe it's unspoken, maybe it is spoken, that now things have to be set and now things have to play out in a very specific way. And the audience must never know how much time you had, what decisions went to do. It has to exist as a very specific kind of thing. And I think that can sometimes be good, that kind of pressure, but I think also a byproduct of that can be that people cease to be responsive to the material, they cease to make discoveries, they cease to be as present because they're trying to do something that they've already done as opposed to being present or being available in that moment. So what I had said to the cast was that even though we're about to perform, the discoveries shouldn't cease. I hope they don't cease, because we're not attempting to put forth something that is polished. We shouldn't maybe lie is a strong word, but I think we should feel comfortable saying we have rehearsed this for a week and this is where we are, to be very open and honest about that. And I think in so doing, that's going to allow us to continue to be available and vulnerable to this material, to these stories, to these characters. And then that's going to make the product all the richer, I think, in coming to a point where we say we're no longer developing, now we're just performing. I think that really limits the long-term reach or the prospects of a piece, to say we're not going to continue to invest, we're just going to do now. So I was very thankful for that, and I think that's something that has existed, even if it hasn't been said, that's existed in each of our shows, is that willingness to continue to explore that resistance to setting.
And basically taking the pressure off of the ensemble. It's not like we're suddenly saying, by the way, this sandbox is now a Broadway stage.
Yeah.
Which some years has felt like that. Suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, we're expected to create some epic production, and now we've only had a week and they don't know this and it's scary. But what we've realized is that this, by the time we're performing, it's actually just sharing a rehearsal. They just happen to come in and witness it. But the work is not being frozen or put into some sort of like pedestal, and there's no judgment for anything going wrong. I remember once a light box didn't turn on, and we'd spent days doing it. It was like illuminated the entire underneath of a set, and it didn't turn on. And I went to Lucius, like freaking out, and Lucius was like, it's fine. And it's because that's not about perfection, even though I love perfection. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
It's not about, we're going to put this on Broadway. It's about being here together and exploring.
I think in terms of continuing to develop a process that feels welcoming, that feels productive and feels profitable, I think that sort of open-handedness is absolutely critical, because I think to go on the other side, I think it can really prohibit people from sort of being subject to the things that they propose on stage. And I think if you have people who are willing to be present, willing to be vulnerable, it really doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing, that's going to be interesting theater. So, some thoughts on how this particular project, the Alumni Theatre Project, ties into the mission of the school. My experience of going to school here, I came in from middle school, so I was just here for high school at CFS. And this sense of being together was something that I had not really experienced in an educational setting, in a familial setting, sure, maybe with friends. But I had never been invited to be a part of a school community before in the way that I think CFS does from the get-go. And that was something that, at least in the context of Long After Love, I wrote about in the director's statements, that the idea of being with an ensemble, being with a community, that these two things sort of mirror each other, I think, in a really beautiful way. I think that's been true throughout all of the shows that we've done. And that's something that's really important to me, something that I look forward to, is this moment when, as a group of artists, we get to come together and be present with each other, share these ideas, and then we get to sort of take that to the next level, which is that not only do we get to do it together, we actually get to do it with everybody that we went to school with. We get to sort of share our vulnerability, share our ideas, share our passions. So I think this, our capacity to come together, to be together, to learn from each other, to love each other, to be present, that, for me, that is what CFS is all about. That, for me, is also what this project is all about. I think one allows the other to happen. I think CFS allows the project to happen. And I think the project allows me to better understand CFS for the sort of amazing institution that it is. So sort of, I think, a beautiful upward momentum is created between the two.
Well said.